the Philippines finds itself in a precarious position, perched on the edge of a geopolitical fault line. If the simmering tensions in the South China Sea were to boil over into open conflict between China and the US, the Philippines could find itself caught directly in the crossfire. In such a scenario, the Philippines would undoubtedly look to its neighbors in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, for support. But could they really rely on them? That's what we're going to unpack today, folks. Because the answer, like most things in geopolitics, is messy, complicated, and more than a little bit terrifying. Let's rewind the tape, shall we? The relationship between the Philippines and its ASEAN brethren hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows. We're talking about a region with a long, tangled history of territorial disputes, political upheavals, and shifting alliances. Remember the Sabah conflict? It's a territorial dispute between the Philippines and Malaysia that has been simmering for decades. Then there's the legacy of colonialism, with different ASEAN nations bearing the scars of British, French, Dutch, and Spanish rule. This has led to cultural and political differences that can sometimes make it difficult for these nations to see eye to eye. Of course, it's not all doom and gloom. ASEAN has played a crucial role in promoting economic cooperation and regional stability. There have been genuine efforts to build trust and solidarity. But let's not kid ourselves. Historical baggage can weigh heavy, and old wounds have a nasty habit of reopening when the pressure's on. Let's be blunt. When it comes to military might, ASEAN nations are simply no match for China. We're talking about a country that boasts the world's second-largest defense budget, a rapidly modernizing military, and a growing arsenal of advanced weaponry. China has aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and hypersonic missiles. Many ASEAN countries, on the other hand, are still struggling to equip their troops with basic equipment. Now, some might argue that ASEAN could leverage its collective strength. But let's not forget that ASEAN is not a military alliance. There's no equivalent of NATO's Article 5, where an attack on one is considered an attack on all. In a conflict between China and the Philippines, it's highly unlikely that other ASEAN nations would be willing to put their own necks on the line. Here's a fun fact. China is the largest trading partner of almost every ASEAN nation. We're talking about billions of dollars in trade, massive infrastructure projects, and vital supply chains. So imagine a scenario where an ASEAN nation sides with the Philippines against China. What do you think happens next? Economic retaliation, sanctions, trade embargoes? The economic fallout would be devastating. And let's not forget about the elephant in the room, the Belt and Road Initiative. It's China's grand plan to build a network of ports, roads, and railways across Asia and beyond. It's a powerful tool of economic diplomacy, and it gives China significant leverage over many ASEAN nations. So, while ASEAN nations might be sympathetic to the Philippines' plight, their economic interests could very well trump their political will. ASEAN is a bit like a dysfunctional family. Sure, they gather for holidays and try to put on a united front, but beneath the surface, there are simmering tensions and conflicting interests. Some ASEAN nations are more aligned with China, while others are more wary of its growing power. This internal division makes it difficult for ASEAN to reach a consensus on any issue, let alone one as sensitive as the South China Sea. And let's not forget about the issue of sovereignty. Many ASEAN nations are fiercely protective of their own independence. They're reluctant to get dragged into a conflict that they see as primarily between the Philippines and China. They don't want to be seen as taking sides. They want to stay neutral, and in a way, can you blame them? Let's face it, geography is not on the Philippines' side. It's a sprawling archipelago surrounded by water and directly facing the Chinese mainland. Many ASEAN nations, on the other hand, are located further inland. They're not facing the same immediate threat from China. And even if they wanted to help, the logistics would be a nightmare. How do you get troops and equipment to the Philippines quickly and effectively? There are limited air bases, congested sea lanes, and the ever-present threat of Chinese interdiction. It's a military planner's worst nightmare. So while ASEAN nations might offer words of support, their geographical limitations could make it practically impossible for them to provide meaningful military assistance. Diplomacy is a delicate dance, especially when you're dealing with a regional powerhouse like China. The Philippines would face an uphill battle trying to rally ASEAN support behind it. China has a long history of using its economic and political clout to influence ASEAN diplomacy. It can pressure individual nations, offer incentives, and sow discord. And let's not forget about the non-interference principle. It's a cornerstone of ASEAN diplomacy, and it essentially means that member states are supposed to stay out of each other's internal affairs. Now, the South China Sea is hardly an internal affair, but China could easily frame it that way, arguing that it's a bilateral issue between itself and the Philippines. So, the Philippines would need to navigate a diplomatic minefield, carefully balancing its need for support with ASEAN's desire to avoid confrontation with China. If the Philippines can't rely on its ASEAN neighbors, what does that mean? Well, in a nutshell, it means they're largely on their own. They would face the daunting prospect of confronting a vastly superior military power without any meaningful external support. Their economy, already vulnerable to Chinese pressure, would be put under immense strain. And perhaps most importantly, it would send a chilling message to the world that the Philippines is an expendable ally, a small nation left to fend for itself in the face of aggression from a regional giant. Now, this isn't to say that all hope is lost. The Philippines has a long history of resilience and resourcefulness. They have a strong military tradition and a fiercely independent spirit, but let's not sugarcoat it. The odds would be stacked against them. So there you have it. The Philippines' reliance on ASEAN nations in a conflict with China is a complex and uncertain equation. Historical baggage, military disparities, economic ties, political divisions, geographical factors, and diplomatic challenges all paint a rather bleak picture. The Philippines may find itself navigating a treacherous path caught between a rock and a hard place. What do you think? Can the Philippines truly rely on ASEAN? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for a deeper dive into the geopolitical complexities of the South China Sea, be sure to check out our other videos on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video to stay updated with our latest content.